Ivra had never known Earth, at least not in the way humans knew it. Her arrival was by chance, or by fate, depending on how one saw it. The event itself had been the result of a broken-down ship, a malfunctioning navigation system, and a series of mistakes that made her crash land in the middle of nowhere. She had come from a star system so far away that the concept of distance seemed irrelevant. Her people had once been a proud and powerful race, highly regarded among the galaxies. But now, they were fractured, divided by the same rules that had governed their existence for centuries: power, strength, and control. And in that cruel society, Ivra was weak. It wasn't physical strength that made her weak, but a sense of empathy, of compassion, a trait her kind had long abandoned in favor of more pragmatic pursuits. She was the product of a civilization that had long lost its way, a civilization where the strong dominated and the weak were either enslaved or discarded. Ivra had been the latter, unable to fit into the mold her people tried to force her into. And now she was running. It wasn't until she arrived on Earth that she truly understood what it meant to be different. Here, the humans were simple in some ways, but complex in others. They didn't need advanced technology or unnatural strength to survive. They relied on ingenuity, emotions, and a deeply rooted sense of community. These humans, who had no idea that she existed, now held the key to her survival. They were her last hope. When she stumbled into the small, rural town, she was exhausted. Her ship had been in disrepair for weeks, and her people had left her behind. She was alone, terrified, and far from home. But she was also determined, driven by a single desperate need: to find safety and to escape the alien males who were closing in on her. Ivra didn't know how to communicate with the humans. She didn't speak their language, and her appearance was foreign to them. But the fear in her eyes was universal. It was something they could understand. The first person she encountered was a man, an older gentleman, who seemed to be working the fields alone. He was out of place in the quiet of the town, as though he had no business being there. He had deep, weathered features, and his clothes were nothing special, though his posture suggested strength. He looked at her with a mixture of curiosity and wariness. She stood there, unable to form words. The only thing she could do was gesture weakly, hoping that he would understand. It wasn't much, but it was all she could offer. At first, the man said nothing. He simply watched her, sizing her up, trying to make sense of the strange figure in front of him. There were no alien markings on her skin, no telltale features that screamed alien. She was human-like in appearance, but there was something about her, an aura of sadness, a depth of loneliness, that set her apart. And then she spoke. The words were incomprehensible, but the tone, the desperation, was unmistakable. "Please, humans," she begged. "Save me from them." The man didn't understand her words, but he understood her tone. He could see the fear in her eyes, the trembling in her voice, the way she seemed to cower in front of him, despite being taller and more intimidating in appearance. He could also see that she wasn't asking for help in the usual way. She wasn't looking for shelter or protection from a single threat. She was running from something larger, something she feared far more than he could comprehend. He couldn't just leave her standing there. He couldn't ignore her. His instincts told him that she wasn't a threat, that she needed help. So he gently approached her, trying his best to communicate with simple gestures. He pointed toward his home, then mimicked the motion of eating, trying to offer comfort in the only way he knew how. Ivra followed, her feet dragging beneath her. She was exhausted, emotionally drained, and could barely stand. They made their way through the fields until they arrived at his small farmhouse. It wasn't much, but it was a place that offered shelter from the unknown. Inside, he introduced her to his sister, Kira, who was immediately concerned about the strange woman. She had no idea who or what this being was, but her brother had brought her in. He trusted her, so Kira knew she had to as well. It wasn't long before they realized that Ivra's story was more complicated than they had expected. As she started to gather her thoughts and find a way to communicate, they learned that she wasn't just seeking shelter from some intergalactic war. She was running from her own kind. Alien males who wanted to claim her, possess her, and force her into a life of servitude. Her people valued strength, but it was a strength she couldn't possess. She wasn't built for the cruelty of their society. She had tried to escape before, but each time they found her. And now she was here on Earth, hiding from them. Ivra's story was unsettling. It was hard for Kira to fully understand. After all, they had no knowledge of Ivra's homeworld or its customs. They had no idea what it meant to be a part of a culture that viewed people like her as little more than property. But they could see the pain in her eyes, the sheer hopelessness that clung to her like a second skin. She was broken, and she was afraid. Ivra's plea had been simple. Save me from them. Save me from the alien males who seek to control me. But there was something more beneath the surface. Kira could see that Ivra wasn't just asking for safety. She was offering something in return. She was offering herself. I will serve you, Ivra had said. I will become your slave. I will be your lady. Anything you ask, I will do it. Just keep me safe. It was an offer that was hard to turn down, especially with the fear and desperation in her eyes. But Kira wasn't sure how to respond. This wasn't just a matter of protecting someone. It was a matter of accepting something that was entirely foreign to them. Hal, her brother, seemed to understand more. His mind was practical, grounded in reality. He knew that they couldn't fight off alien males. They weren't warriors. They were farmers. But there was something about Ivra's presence that made him want to protect her. He didn't know why. She was an alien, after all. But there was something about her, her vulnerability, her sincerity, that made him feel responsible for her. It wasn't long before the townspeople learned about Ivra. Rumors spread like wildfire. Some were curious, others fearful. It wasn't every day that an alien showed up at your doorstep, asking for refuge. But despite their fears, there was a part of them that wanted to help. They knew what it felt like to be powerless, to be at the mercy of something greater. Ivra's story struck a chord with them, and so they began to come together, forming a silent agreement. They would protect her, and in return, she would become part of their lives, part of their community. But it wasn't just protection she sought. Ivra wanted more. She wanted to be free from the oppressive alien males who sought to control her. She wanted to belong, to find a place where she could be herself, without fear, without shame. And slowly, in ways they didn't fully understand, she began to find that place. The days that followed were a blur of uncertainty and quiet tension. Ivra, despite her alien origins, began to adapt to her new life on Earth. It wasn't easy. She was constantly reminded of the vast differences between her own world and this strange new one. Yet, the humans, particularly Hal and Kira, made it easier. They helped her understand their ways, slowly introducing her to their customs, their food, and the basic necessities of life on Earth. Kira, who had initially been hesitant, began to warm to Ivra. She wasn't entirely sure what the woman's presence meant for their quiet existence. The fact that Ivra had pledged herself to them, to serve them, was unsettling. But Kira knew something had shifted in her heart when she saw the way Ivra looked at them. Eyes full of gratitude, but also a deep sense of longing. But what was most disconcerting to Kira was how Ivra seemed to carry her fear wherever she went. It wasn't something easily hidden. It was in the way she looked over her shoulder every now and then, the way her eyes darted nervously to the horizon when she heard the wind howl in the distance, as though expecting someone or something to appear at any moment. Kira couldn't help but wonder. Who were these alien males that Ivra spoke of, and what did they want with her? Hal, on the other hand, had accepted Ivra's presence with surprising ease. Perhaps it was his sense of duty or his practical nature that allowed him to process the situation more clearly. He wasn't one to question things unnecessarily, especially when the answers were unknown and the stakes so high. Hal took his responsibilities seriously, and although he didn't fully understand Ivra's situation, he had vowed to protect her. But there were moments, late at night when the house was silent, when he found himself staring at her. She was so different and yet not. Her alien features, though striking, had become familiar over time, as had her mannerisms, the way she moved, the way she held herself. There was something deeply human in the way she sought comfort from him. And though she had pledged herself as a servant, there was a subtle power in her vulnerability, something Hal found both disarming and compelling. As Ivra's days unfolded, she worked hard to show her gratitude. She took to the farm's chores with determination, eager to prove herself. At first, Kira was skeptical. What did a woman from another world know about farming? But to her surprise, Ivra was a quick learner. She wasn't afraid of the physical labor, and with each passing day, she became more capable. Ivra did everything they asked of her, but more than that, she wanted to understand the humans she had been taken in by. She asked questions, and although the language barrier remained an issue, there were moments when they communicated without words. She would observe their gestures, the subtle shifts in their facial expressions, and try to mimic their actions. It was a slow process, but in time, they began to understand each other more clearly. One afternoon, after a long day of work in the fields, Ivra and Kira sat on the porch of the farmhouse, sipping tea. The sun was beginning to dip below the horizon, casting a warm golden light over the land. "I still don't understand," Kira said softly, glancing over at Ivra. "Why are they after you? What have you done?" Ivra hesitated. It was a question she had been asked many times, and each time it became harder to answer. She had never fully understood why the males of her species had targeted her. She had always been different, and that difference had made her a target. "I never asked for this," Ivra replied quietly, her voice tinged with sorrow. "I wasn't meant to be a part of their plans. But I have something they want, something they can't get from anyone else. That's why they're after me." Kira raised an eyebrow. "What is it? What do they want from you?" Ivra swallowed hard. "I don't know how to explain it. It's not something I can control, but I think it's tied to my abilities. You see, we are not like humans. Our species is governed by different laws, different needs. And some of us, especially the males, can be possessive. They want what they think they're entitled to." She paused, and Kira could sense the weight of her words. "It's not just that they want me to serve them," Ivra continued. "It's that they want to own me. They see me as a possession, something to control." Kira felt a pang of sympathy for her, but it was quickly replaced by a sense of anger. She had seen Ivra's fear in the way she carried herself, and it made her heart ache. No one should live in constant fear of being possessed, least of all someone as kind and gentle as Ivra. "I don't understand," Kira said, shaking her head. "Why not fight back? Why are you offering yourself to us instead of standing your ground?" Ivra's eyes filled with unshed tears. "Because I'm not strong like them. I don't know how to fight. I never learned how. I just want to live without fear. I want to belong somewhere." Kira's expression softened. She reached out and placed a hand on Ivra's shoulder. "You belong here," she said firmly. "We will protect you. You don't have to become anyone's slave. You don't have to serve us. You just need to be yourself." But Ivra shook her head. "I don't know how to be anything else. I've lived my whole life in service to others, whether I wanted to or not. It's the only way I know how to survive." Kira thought about this for a moment. There was a part of her that understood. Ivra had been raised in a society that had broken her down, made her believe she was only valuable when she served others. That was how she had been conditioned, how she had survived. But Kira couldn't accept that. She couldn't let Ivra believe that her only worth was in being subjugated to someone else's will. No one, human or alien, deserved that. Not in this world, and not in hers. "You don't have to be anyone's slave here," Kira repeated, her voice resolute. "You are a person, Ivra, and you are free to choose your path, just like everyone else." Ivra looked at Kira, her eyes wide with disbelief. "Free? I don't know what that means anymore." Kira gave her a gentle smile. "Then it's time for you to learn. Over the next few days, the dynamic between Ivor and the humans of the small farm shifted. They had accepted her, not just as a stranger in need of shelter, but as an equal, a person deserving of kindness and respect. Ivor slowly began to open up, the fear that had once defined her existence beginning to fade. But even as the days passed, there were moments when she would look to the skies, her thoughts clearly drifting to the malevolent forces that were hunting her. The alien males were still out there, and Ivor knew that it was only a matter of time before they found her. The only question was, would the humans who had shown her such kindness be able to protect her when that time came? As the days went by, Ivor's fears were never far from her mind. She could feel the weight of them, heavy and persistent, lurking in the back of her thoughts. She would often catch herself staring into the distance, her gaze drawn toward the horizon, as though she could somehow sense the presence of the alien males, even if they were miles away. There was a part of her that wanted to push those thoughts aside, to embrace the sense of safety and belonging that Hal and Kira had given her, but the fear gnawed at her. It was deeply ingrained, part of who she was, and the thought of being hunted again was too overwhelming to ignore. Kira noticed these moments of distraction. She had grown accustomed to the way Ivor would sometimes become distant, her attention lost in the vastness of the sky. It made Kira uneasy, as though there was an invisible wall between them that Ivor couldn't quite bring herself to breach. Kira knew that there was more to Ivor's story, something she was still holding back. But she wasn't sure how to push without making the alien woman retreat further into herself. Hal, too, could sense the tension, but he didn't press Ivor for answers. He was the type to give people space, to let them come to him when they were ready. Yet, he couldn't help but wonder about the alien males she feared. He had heard bits and pieces of Ivor's story, but she hadn't gone into detail. It was obvious she wasn't ready to share everything, and Hal respected that. However, he couldn't help but feel a growing sense of unease. They were living in the open, and sooner or later, Ivor's past would catch up with her. One evening, as the sun set and the cool evening breeze began to roll in, Ivor was sitting outside the farmhouse, her eyes trained on the sky, lost in her thoughts. Hal joined her, sitting down beside her quietly. The two of them sat in silence for a while, the only sounds being the chirping of crickets and the distant rustling of the trees. Finally, Hal broke the silence, his voice low but steady. "You've been looking at the sky like that every day," he said. "Are you waiting for something?" Ivor blinked, as if pulled from a deep reverie. She turned to look at him, her eyes filled with a mix of sadness and uncertainty. "I'm waiting for them," she admitted softly. "The males. They'll come for me. It's only a matter of time." Hal's brow furrowed. "Who are they exactly? Why do they want you?" Ivor hesitated, her lips pressed tightly together. For a moment, it seemed as though she would remain silent, but then she exhaled slowly, her breath shaky. "They're the ones who control everything in my world," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "The males. They hold all the power. They see women like me as possessions, something to be claimed, to be used." Hal's chest tightened at her words. The idea of anyone being treated that way, let alone someone as kind and vulnerable as Ivor, made his blood boil. "But why you?" he asked, his tone soft but insistent. "Why are they after you?" Ivor looked away, staring at the ground as if the answer were written in the dirt beneath her. "I don't know," she admitted. "I never asked for it. I never wanted it. But there's something about me, something in my blood, that makes me valuable to them. They think they can use me to their advantage." Hal felt a surge of anger rise within him. The idea of anyone treating Ivor like a tool, an object to be exploited, filled him with a fierce protectiveness. He wanted to promise her that she was safe now, that she would never have to worry about such things again. But he knew better. The reality of the situation was far more complicated. "They'll come," Ivor said, her voice barely audible. "They always come. And when they do, I won't be able to protect myself. I don't know how to fight them. I'm not like you, Hal. I'm not strong enough to stand against them. Hal placed a hand on her shoulder, his touch gentle but firm. You don't have to fight them alone, he said. We'll fight with you. Ivra looked up at him, her expression a mixture of disbelief and hope. You would? You would risk everything to help me. Hal nodded, his gaze unwavering. We're a team now, Ivra. We look out for each other. You're not alone. Ivra swallowed, her throat tight with emotion. For the first time since she had arrived on Earth, she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, there was a place for her here. A place where she wasn't a possession. A place where she was valued. Not for what she could give, but for who she was. Kira, who had been watching the exchange from the doorway, stepped outside, her expression thoughtful. Hal's right, she said, joining them. You're not alone, Ivra. We've got your back, no matter what. Ivra's eyes shimmered with unshed tears, and for a moment she couldn't speak. She had never known kindness like this before. In her world, kindness was a rarity, and she had grown so accustomed to betrayal that she had learned to keep her guard up. But here, with these humans, she felt something different. She felt like she belonged. The weight of the fear that had clung to her for so long seemed a little lighter in that moment. It wasn't gone, far from it. But for the first time, she didn't feel completely alone in carrying it. Days turned into weeks, and Ivra continued to settle into her new life, though her anxiety never fully left her. Hal and Kira kept their promise to protect her, and as time passed, the bond between them grew stronger. But Ivra's past was never far behind, and the threat of the alien males still loomed over her, casting a shadow on everything. The small farm, once a place of peace and quiet, was now the site of whispered conversations and secret plans. The humans knew that sooner or later, they would have to face whatever it was that was hunting Ivra. And when that day came, they would have to be ready. The weeks had passed with a quiet intensity that weighed on everyone. Ivra, though surrounded by the warmth and protection of Hal and Kira, never let go of the fear that the alien males would eventually find her. Her nights were often restless, filled with nightmares of those dark figures, powerful and menacing, closing in on her once more. She would wake in the early hours, her heart pounding, only to find herself safe within the familiar walls of the farmhouse. Hal, ever patient, continued to be her steady anchor. His kindness never wavered, and Kira, with her quick wit and sharp mind, kept the mood light, even when the shadows of their predicament grew long. But as the days wore on, they all knew that something had to change. They couldn't continue hiding forever. It was on a cool evening, as they sat around the dinner table after a long day of work, that Hal spoke up. We need to take action, he said, his voice calm but resolute. Ivra looked at him, her brow furrowing. Take action? What do you mean? Hal leaned forward, his eyes steady. We can't keep running. If those males are going to come for you, we need to be ready. We need a plan. We need to fight back. Kira, ever the strategist, nodded in agreement. Hal's right. Hiding isn't going to protect you forever, Ivra. We need to stand our ground. But we also need to know what we're up against. We can't just charge in blind. Ivra's heart raced. She had never been one for violence, never been in a position where she had to fight for her life. The very thought of it terrified her. But there was a flicker of something in her. The same strength that had carried her this far, the determination to protect herself and those she had come to care for. I don't know if I can fight them, she whispered, her voice trembling. You don't have to fight them alone, Kira said gently. We'll be with you every step of the way. Together, we can face anything. It was a difficult decision, but Ivra knew that she couldn't live in fear any longer. She had to face her past, face the alien males who had made her life a prison, and she knew deep down that with Hal and Kira by her side, she had a chance to reclaim her freedom, a chance to take control of her future. Over the next few days, they made preparations. Kira used her knowledge of Earth technology to research everything she could about the alien males that Ivra had described. They worked together to build a defense, creating traps and weapons that might give them an edge when the time came. Hal, ever the practical one, made sure the farm was fortified, ensuring that they had everything they needed to survive any kind of attack. Ivra, though hesitant at first, found herself growing more confident as the days passed. She began to learn how to defend herself, not through brute force, but through skill and precision. Kira taught her how to use the tools they had on hand, and Hal showed her how to move quietly, how to stay alert. Every lesson, every moment of preparation brought them closer as a team. Ivra began to see herself not as a helpless alien, but as a warrior in her own right, someone who had a part to play in the fight for her freedom. Then, one evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, they saw the first signs that the alien males had found them. The air seemed to grow heavier, the birds silent, as if nature itself was holding its breath. Ivra felt a shiver run down her spine, a sense of dread creeping in. "It's time," Hal said quietly, his voice calm but filled with purpose. They gathered their things, whatever they had prepared, and made their way to the edge of the farm, where they had set up a defensive perimeter. Ivra's heart raced, but she forced herself to focus. She could do this. She had to. As they waited in the shadows, the sound of approaching footsteps grew louder. The air seemed to thrum with tension. Ivra's eyes darted nervously between Hal and Kira, both of them calm and collected, but she could see the determination in their faces. They were ready, and then they came. The alien males, tall and imposing, their skin dark and metallic, their eyes glowing with an unnatural light. There were 4 of them, and they moved with a precision that spoke of years of hunting. But they were unprepared for the trap that awaited them. Ivra didn't hesitate. As the first alien male stepped into the clearing, she sprang into action, using the knowledge she had gained. She set off a series of devices they had created to disable their attackers. A blast of energy hit one of the aliens, causing him to stumble, his shield flickering. Ivra's heart pounded, but she didn't stop. She kept moving, her movements swift and practiced. Kira and Hal were right behind her, each of them working in perfect sync. Kira's sharp eyes picked out the weakest points in the aliens' defenses, and Hal, with his natural strength, used the weapons they had crafted to strike with deadly precision. The alien males, though powerful, were not prepared for the coordinated attack they faced. They faltered, thrown off balance by the unexpected resistance. The battle was hard, and Ivra could feel the fear trying to creep back into her mind. But this time, it didn't take hold. This time, she was in control. She had something to fight for, and she wasn't going to back down. One by one, the alien males fell. The first, disabled by the energy blast, was quickly overwhelmed by Hal and Kira's combined strength. The others followed suit, their attacks failing as Ivra and her human allies outmaneuvered them, each strike more precise than the last. And then it was over. The alien males lay defeated, their once glowing eyes now dimmed, their bodies still. Ivra stood panting, her body trembling from the exertion, but a sense of relief flooded through her. She had done it. They had done it. They had fought back and won. Hal approached her, placing a hand gently on her shoulder. "You were amazing," he said, his voice filled with pride. Ivra looked at him, her chest tight with emotion. "I couldn't have done it without you," she said softly. Kira smiled, stepping forward to join them. "We make a great team." Ivra felt a surge of gratitude, a warmth spreading through her chest. For the first time in her life, she truly felt like she belonged. She had faced her fears, fought for her freedom, and emerged victorious. And in that moment, she realized something else. The fear of the alien males had been the greatest weapon they had over her. But now, that weapon was gone. They returned to the farmhouse that night, the world around them still and peaceful, as if nothing had ever happened. Ivra felt a deep sense of peace settle within her. The terror that had once ruled her life had been defeated, not by force alone, but by the love and support of the people who had become her family. In the days that followed, life returned to a semblance of normalcy. The scars of the battle faded, and the farm once again became a sanctuary, a place where Ivor could truly be free. She had proven to herself and to her new family that she was no longer the helpless alien female she had once been. She was stronger now. She was a fighter, and no one would ever make her feel like she was less than. As the seasons changed and the years passed, Ivor's fear never completely disappeared. But she had learned how to live with it, how to rise above it. She had her family. She had her home. And no alien males, no matter how powerful, would ever take that from her. And with that, she finally found peace.